Hello and welcome to Dear Franny. I am your host, Francesca Hogi, and this is the third episode of season 6. I realized I don't think I introduced myself. I think I just kind of took it for granted that if you're listening to the show, then you know me, which is why am I doing that? So I want to just take a moment to introduce myself or maybe reintroduce myself if you are a longtime listener of the show, part of my community. I'm so happy to have you here. I just did another podcast with my friend Leilani Brown called My First Job. I was just listening to the episode, my interview or her interview with me. I'm sorry, it's called Your First Job, not My First Job, Your First Job. And she interviews people from different industries about their first jobs and just their lessons and their journey. We recorded the interview probably about a month ago, but the episode came out today, the day that I'm recording this. And I just listened to it and I was like, oh, yeah, I haven't talked about this in a while. So I am not going to give you the full rundown of everything I talked about in that podcast interview. And actually, we will put it in the show notes so you can take a listen if you're interested. And also just in supporting that show, which I recommend. I've listened to some of the other episodes too, and it's really good. But I think maybe it's a little bit helpful to give a little context of like, who am I and why am I talking to you about romantic love? Like, why should you listen to me? The reason that I think you should listen to me is, well, first of all, I'm very much a person who believes in you either resonate with what I say or you don't. And I hope that you resonate and you're listening. So that's, a good sign that you might. But if you're new, just know that everything that I'm saying is coming from a place of my personal experience, my professional experience, and just, all these lessons that I've learned working with clients one-on-one, helping them with romantic love, but also just from understanding how life works and being a student of life, being a student of love. That started as a young child. I was a very romantic child. I would read my older sister is 12 years older than me, and I would read her romance novels and I would read these stories of adventure and passion. And, they're always really dramatic because it's a romance novel. And I just loved the idea of having passionate romantic relationships and traveling the world and just having all these adventures. And when I think about my childhood, I think about how much thought I gave to love and being in love. And I had this desire to be in love. And I also had the benefit of having two parents who loved each other and they showed each other that they loved each other. So I'm very, very fortunate in that I grew up in a household where love was always at the forefront. Like I never had to, wonder if I was loved. I knew that my parents loved each other. It's something that, again, it's just such a blessing. And my father, who, even though he and my mom were totally, one of those meant to be couples. And by the time I came along, that's all I knew. But before I came along, before they met each other, my father had been married 3 times previously. So my mom was actually his 4th marriage. So the 3rd time was not the charm, the 4th was. And he used to talk to me about relationships as a child. He would tell me, the importance of focusing on character. He would tell me the importance of really paying attention to how any man that I was interested in, how he treated people, how he treated women, how they treated their mothers. He would literally point out to me people in our lives and he'd say, you see that relationship, you see how he speaks to her, or you see how she's suffering being with that man. And I think about it now and I'm like, this is really pretty remarkable. I was destined to do this work because my dad was my first love mentor. And he would say to me, and he really drilled this into me, he would say that how important it was to use discernment in whoever you are romantically involved with. And he'd say, there are lots of guys out there who are going to want to try to dazzle you with their fancy footwork. That's what he used to say what they think you want to hear, but it's all like smoke and mirrors. And so one thing that really helped and grounded me my whole life is that I had this desire to have romantic partnership, but I also had this foundation of knowing like it needs to be good and it needs to be healthy and it needs to be sustainable and it needs to be with somebody who is really deserving of your partnership and of being in a relationship with you. I had my own long, fraught love journey, but when I got to my adulthood and I started really being like, okay, I really want to have relationships. I really want to date. I realized that I didn't know how to do that because even though my dad had given me all this information about like character and how to pick a good partner, that didn't translate into knowing actually how to date and how to go out into the world and flirt. And that's something that felt really challenging for me. And so I had to teach myself. So my dad was my first love mentor, but I was my first love coach because I had to go out and teach myself how to start dating. And back then I was a lawyer. I was a young lawyer in New York City. And I was like, okay, I want relationships. I got to figure this out. Nobody's going to teach me. So I've got to teach myself. And that's what I did. So I really understood that my assignment at that time was to actually like figure out how to date. And thank goodness for online dating, because that was the thing that enabled me to really practice and go on a lot of dates and meet a lot of people and learn a lot of lessons and, recognize like there are actually guys out there who want to date me, which was a revelation. And then it was like, okay, well, I can get a first date, but these dates aren't really going anywhere. So that was another revelation of like, okay, well, it's not just about getting a date. It's about like, how do you actually build? How do you connect? And that really led me into realizing the importance of flirting and just being more vulnerable and allowing for romantic connection to flourish, because I was very comfortable with friendship, but I wasn't comfortable with romance. And so that was another stage that I recognized that. I was like, okay. And so I just kept on pushing myself. And I learned so many things that I actually started blogging about dating. And I had a dating advice blog years ago. I mean, this must have been like around 2008 that I started my dating advice blog. And it was because I had just learned so much about dating. And I could see so many people struggling with a lot of the things that I used to struggle with. And I was like, hey, I can help. I can help people who aren't as far along on this dating journey as I am. So I started doing that. And I was still in this law career, not knowing what my next step was going to be, knowing that I didn't want to be a lawyer forever, but not knowing what else there was for me. Now, when I tell the story, it seems like, oh, there was lots of reasons why I went this path into a love career, but it wasn't obvious at the time because, it's not like anybody's saying, you've got a lot of knowledge about dating. You should be a love coach. Like that didn't exist, okay, back then. So it was many more years until I discovered that being a love coach was a thing and that being a matchmaker was a thing and that there were people whose job it was to help people with romantic love. So it was 2012 where I first discovered that. It was 2013 where I started my business, which was initially a matchmaking business. And I was working for myself. I was also working for Paul C. Brunson, who you should look him up if you're not familiar with him. He's awesome. And I started working for his matchmaking agency as his lead matchmaker and coach. And so I got a lot of experience very quickly because I was working with Paul. And Paul was very popular at the time. He had a show on Oprah's network. He had a book. So there was a lot of momentum. So we had all different kinds of clients that we were working with. And it was a real crash course in learning how to help people with romantic love. Because as matchmakers, our job was to literally set them up with people who are compatible partners, who we think they'll get along with, who we think they'll be attracted to each other. We think there's a potential there. I learned very quickly that it was not as simple as making introductions. It wasn't as simple as saying, okay, client, you want somebody who meets these basic parameters. You're looking for somebody who's a match for you in terms of their love goals, in terms of their education, in terms of their values, etc. Okay, great. So here's, 3 people, 5 people, 7 people for you to meet. And I realized because one of the really great things about being a matchmaker is that you have your clients, but then you also have the people that you're setting your clients up with. And we would get feedback from the dates that we were setting our clients up with. So if I set my client up with 5 different men, and most of our clients were women who dated men, we also had other clients, but that was the majority. If I set a client up with 5 different guys, I would talk to all 5 of those guys after they went out. And I started to hear very quickly, there were patterns, right? There was feedback that was like, oh, wait, there's a lot more going on here. And that led to me having to have a lot of conversations with clients like, hey, so, the feedback that I got was that you seemed maybe really distracted, or you seemed maybe hyper-focused on just asking them a bunch of questions and they felt like it was a bit of interrogation and not a conversation, or maybe they thought that you were rude to the waiter, or just these little, I say little, but they're not little things, because when dating and somebody's getting an impression of you, all those things matter. And they also are symptoms of larger things. It's not a matter of the fact that this one date didn't go anywhere, but it's more about what does that say about the larger pattern at work here. And there were some clients who were really like, wow, okay. And they were able to take that feedback. And then the feedback that we'd get from their dates changed and it got more positive. And they were getting asked on second dates more and third dates. And we were realizing like, oh, the people that we can match are the people who are actually willing to really look at themselves and really recognize that they are half of the equation here. And that they are consistently getting the same results, because anything random can happen, right? But these consistent patterns need to be addressed, and no one can address them but you, right? And so through that journey, that matchmaking journey, I realized that coaching was really the secret sauce. And so I transitioned to coaching. So I don't matchmake anymore, but I did for about 3 years. But for the last 9 years, essentially, I have been coaching people. And it's far more successful for my clients. It's far more enjoyable for me, which also matters. And I've, done a lot of writing through the years. I was a contributor to Huffington Post for a number of years. So I wrote a bunch of articles there about lots of different topics related to dating. I was on a segment on the Today Show for a year and a half. And so lots of, advice there for people about dating. Obviously, I have this podcast. This is the 6th season of this podcast. And I have really just been over the process of, this journey in this love career of working with lots of people, talking to lots of people, and just really making sure that I know what I'm talking about, because this is romantic love. And I understand, as a romantic child who grew up to be a romantic adult, I understand how meaningful this is to people. It's not something to take lightly, and it's not something to just give some general advice. I mean, you can give general advice that can help people have a little bit better experience dating, maybe a little better experience online. Absolutely. And I'm not saying that that isn't valuable, but for the bigger challenges that so many of us, and I say us because, I've had a number of challenges throughout my love journey as well, face they're so beyond that. And so, as you might know, I just finished my first book. It's called How to Find True Love. It comes out in March of 2025. I'm really excited about it. But it took me all of this time to write this book because I really needed to make sure that I was saying something that other people weren't saying, number one. So other people weren't saying it, and that it was a book that needed to exist, and that I was the person who needed to write it. And so now that I've gotten to that place and I've written this book, it's been a really amazing, challenging, but wonderful experience. And I'm back podcasting. So that is a long, but hopefully helpful bit of backstory about how I came professionally to do this work. And additionally to that, what I wanted to talk about today is something that I see a lot. And I've seen this, since the beginning of my love career with matchmaking, which is that, and it's this interesting paradox, because when it comes to romantic love, we simultaneously put it on a pedestal as a very special kind of love. And it has its own rules, and it's in its own category, and it has its own significance. And, a lot of people think it's the best love and the most important love and the love that makes life worth living and makes you successful in life if you have that romantic partnership. So we simultaneously have it up on a pedestal, and also we are diminishing its power because we're not tapping into the true power of love. When we engage in these hierarchies of love and we say, okay, romantic love is this special category, it's a little bit actually erasing or overlooking the true power of love, because love is love. And it's many things, but it is a spiritual force, right? So love is spiritual. Love is not a physical thing. It's not a tangible thing. You can't put it in your pocket, but it is this spiritual force that exists within all of us and within the universe. And it is something that is infinitely abundant, which is evidenced by the fact that none of us ever worries about running out of love, right? You're not like, oh my gosh, I have to hold back how much love I'm giving this person because what if I run out, right? That's not something that you've probably ever thought, because that's not a thing, right? We understand that we have this infinite reserve of love within us. And of course, there's different flavors of love, different types of love. There's platonic love, there's self-love, there's familial love, there's romantic love, there's career love, there's body love, there's money love. There's all different ways in which we interact with the world, and love has a place in all of them. However, the fundamental qualities and characteristics of love are the same. And I see this time and time again where in the desire to have romantic love, people actually lose the power of love, because up on that pedestal, romantic love becomes this thing that is out there. It's something that you've got to chase, you've got to hunt, you've got to be lucky to find it. It's outside of you. You don't have any power over it. So putting something on a pedestal doesn't give you power. It gives an idea of that thing power. And so often in the journey of finding that true love partnership, of dating, of navigating an existing relationship and strengthening that and letting that relationship thrive over time, because we have these ideas often that it's something that you don't have control over and it's outside of yourself, then you're not actually doing all that you can to actually let love thrive in your life. And so, the way this can look in the context of being in a relationship is if you're not happy, if you're not feeling a lot of the emotion of love and being in love with your partner, it becomes your partner's fault, right? Or, there's this expectation that when you meet somebody, you're supposed to know right away if they are the right romantic partner for you. And that can happen, right? But how many times have you thought that somebody was the right romantic partner for you, only to discover, oh, okay, I was wrong, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's part of the journey, right? Not every relationship is meant to last forever. And indeed, many should not last forever. However, if you understand more holistically and you take more responsibility for your role in growing in your ability to love, right? To give love, to receive it, the more responsibility you take, the more you are bringing romantic love down off the pedestal and you're putting it right in front of you. It's something that you can tangibly participate in. This concept of centering love in your life is something that I talk about a lot. And actually, it's the first chapter in my book called Center Love, literally. And the reason I start the book there, and I'm talking about it today, is because I've seen this time and time and time again. There's tendency to neglect all of the power of love, starting with how you're loving yourself. This is an energetic thing, experiencing love. It is also emotional. It's also action-based, right? And there's so much love that we have available to us, starting with loving yourself and your relationship with yourself, because that's the real magic. Because once you really understand what it means to have a loving relationship with yourself, having kindness and compassion towards yourself, that means really believing that you're worthy. That means having boundaries. That means being accountable, right? That means all sorts of things. Like loving behavior looks like so many different things. And so when you can really start to cultivate that within, then that is going to radiate out into all of your relationships, romantic and otherwise. And when you combine that foundation of love with your intention for a romantic partnership, that's when there's certain actions that are going to start to reveal themselves. So if you're like, wow, I'm dating, but like this pattern keeps showing up, or I keep meeting people and this keeps on happening, then that's information, right? So that's information. And what I encourage you, no matter where you are on that journey, is to ask yourself, if this experience is happening for a reason that is in my highest good, what might that be? What might that be? This is a conversation I've had many, many times. So I'll just give you a generic summary of this type of conversation, where so many people in dating, especially when they're really, really motivated to meet someone, they ignore their intuition. They override their intuition about people. They might meet someone, maybe they meet them in person, maybe they connect with them online, and then there's something that is really like an alarm bell is going off, but they're like, no. I want to meet someone and maybe this is them. And, and there's this talking yourself out of something that is really your intuition telling you this is not the person. Now, having said that, sometimes we still need to go and have that experience just so you can learn like, okay, wow, okay, I can trust myself, because I actually did know on our first date when they said XYZ, that maybe that was going to be an issue. And guess what? It was an issue. And the point here is not that if there's anything that you don't like about another person, that you immediately cut them off. That's not what I'm saying. Self-awareness, which is also an act of self-love, is to cultivate that self-awareness, is really important for you to understand what your love assignment is, right? So maybe you're a person who makes snap judgments and your assignment is to be more open, right? And to not assume that if someone says, oh, I really like football, for instance, oh, I don't want to date them because that means that they're going to just like watch football all the time, like all fall and all winter, and I'll never see them. I've heard people say things like that. And it's like, just because somebody said they like football and now you're projecting this whole scenario that may or may not even be true, you want to look at and be really honest with yourself. Am I saying no to people for reasons that really have to do with their character, how they treat me, our shared relationship goals, right? Because those are all good reasons, to say no, versus I'm making a bunch of assumptions about what it means if they say XYZ. And that's part of figuring out what your assignment is. But if you can accept and start from the premise of, I am on a lifelong love journey, and everything that is happening and that is unfolding on this journey is here to teach me how to be more loving. It is here to teach me how to embody love for myself, love for other people, right? So that's your ability to give love. That's your ability to receive love. That's your ability to feel comfortable being in the energy and the emotion and the experience of love. If you're willing to start from that point and you ask yourself that question with that self-loving, compassionate curiosity that I'm often talking about, then you'll start to get answers, right? And so maybe the answer is, like, to use this example that I started with, wow, I actually need to start trusting myself more. And I need to start listening to that voice inside of me. And I need to start believing in myself. And maybe that's your assignment right now. Maybe you're in a season of really developing your own trust muscle. Maybe you're in a season of opening yourself up more and not being as maybe rigid or regimented about who you assume that you're be compatible with in the past. Maybe you're in a season of exploration, or maybe you're in a season of like, actually, I'm really clear, right? And so now I'm actually ready to meet a person who I can build a relationship with because I've had enough experiences. I've had enough self-knowledge. I've dated long enough. I've had relationships, and I'm actually really, really clear on what I want my next relationship to feel like. And so I can tell really quickly whether or not someone is or isn't a match with that, or something else, right? So whatever it is, if you can start to identify it and then get curious about, okay, well, what might I need to do differently? What might be my next best step to learning this lesson, or to breaking this pattern, or to starting a new pattern, right? What do I need to prioritize that I haven't been prioritizing in the past? A big thing that a lot of people don't prioritize that I wish they would in dating is your self-care. Because if you're going on a bunch of dates because you feel like, okay, I've got to go on dates, I want to meet somebody, so I've got to keep going. If you're wearing yourself out, you're exhausted, you're uninspired, it feels like this frustrating slog, then guess what? The chances that you're going to meet someone and make a really beautiful connection when you're feeling that way are just diminished. It is not impossible, right? However, you're not really setting yourself up to succeed. If you can, and apologies if you can hear this siren because I am in New York City right now and there's a lot of sirens here. So understanding what that looks like for you, where you are right now, is so, so powerful. And it's how you start to reclaim some of your agency in your romantic relationships. And it's how you start to learn lessons. And it's how you start to get different results. You get different results when you learn a new lesson and you show up with a different energy, different behavior. So dating self-care is really important. Again, listening to your intuition is really important. Having boundaries is really important. Not being judgmental is really important. If you have a list of the things that you want to meet, that you want in a partner, nothing wrong with having that list. But you want to look at that list and just make sure, does everything on this list actually relate to the relationship I want to have? Or are these ideas that I have about the kind of person that I would be compatible with, or that I would like to be compatible with? But am I actually holding myself back by, sticking to these rigid standards, right? Because think about all the people you met in the past who met that were criteria. Did that make you compatible with those people, right? So, and an easy example that I always give of this is education. And I get this. Look, I am someone with an advanced degree, And I work with a lot of people who have, college degrees, advanced degrees, and they're like, I want somebody who's the same level of education as me. And I always ask them why. Just because I want you to answer this question for yourself. And this is a good exercise to go through that list of characteristics that you're seeking in a partner and just ask why? What does this actually have to do with my relationship? So I'll ask about education. And often the answer is, well, I want someone who won't be intimidated, or someone who is intellectually stimulating, or someone who can relate to my life experience. And those are all totally valid whys. However, is it true that every person with your same level of education won't be intimidated by you? No, it's not true. Is it true that there are people who don't have your same level of education who won't be intimidated by you? Yes, it is true. There are people who don't have your level of education who also won't be intimidated by you. Are there people who have your same level of education or maybe higher with whom you don't feel that you have an intellectually stimulating dynamic? Yes. So if that's the case, then is it possible that there are people who maybe they don't have the educational background that you thought you wanted, but your ability to have intellectual stimulation with them is really amazing, right? And so again, this is an easy example of just how sometimes there are these assumptions that we make, and there are these qualities that we use as a proxy for something else. And when I'm, encouraging you to go through this exercise, and if you're like, I don't have a list, well, then write a list just to even go through this exercise. Like if I were to say to you, if I was still matchmaking and I said to you, hi, so I want to introduce you to someone really amazing. Let me know, what are the parameters? What are you looking for? Who do you want to meet? Right. And just imagine, what would your answer be to that question? And it's okay to have preferences, of course. But again, it's a powerful exercise to look at that list. And I always tell people, I'm like, I don't care how long the list is. You could have 100 traits that you're seeking on that list. Still, for each one, ask why, right? Is this actually connected to my relationship? Is this based on an assumption? If I look in the past, because, a lot of times people will say to me, I'm only going to date someone who's, XYZ. And it's because of my past relationships. And I was like, okay, so did your past relationship not work out because your partner didn't have this trait? Or did your past relationship not work out because the two of you couldn't communicate with each other? Or they took you for granted, or you took them for granted, or there weren't boundaries, or there wasn't physical attraction, or there were, so you got to start to do this, and this is what I do with my clients. Part of what I do with my clients is to help them to make sense of what has come before. But this is an exercise that you can do for yourself to at least start to get some clarity, because maybe in this season, your assignment is, I just need to go on dates with people who are nice to me and who appreciate me, whom I don't feel like I have to prove my worthiness to them. Maybe that's your assignment in the season, just so you can see that that's possible and you can have that experience and you can set a new bar for yourself, not in terms of the boxes that this person checks, in terms of their personal characteristics, but in terms of the dynamic and the experience of getting to know them and being in a relationship with them. So I'm going to wrap this up because I'm trying to keep these episodes on the shorter side so they are more digestible. But in all my years of working with hundreds of people at this point, hearing from lots more, and, my own relationship journey, I can just tell you that it's so easy to feel disempowered and like your love life is just happening to you. And I promise you that you have more power to shift things than it might feel at this moment. And if you feel powerless, then I really want to encourage you to start to get curious and set an intention and say, okay, if this Francesca person is right, and there is something more that I can do, that I do have power here that I'm maybe not tapped into, what might that be? That's what I want to discover. That's the answer that I'm seeking right now. That's my intention for this phase of my journey. So that curiosity, when you're asking that question with that compassionate curiosity, so you're not judging yourself, you're literally just getting curious, you will start to get answers. You will start to get feedback. And if you start to act on those answers and that feedback, then you will start to get different results. I promise. It's just the law of cause and effect in action, right? Know that you have that power. Thank you for listening. Please keep listening. If you're new to this podcast, I'm so happy to have you here. If you are a return listener, I'm so grateful that you are back for more. Thank you so very much. But I'm going to keep going with these episodes where I'm trying to give you a little bit of a deeper level of understanding about how love works and the purpose of your love journey, my whole goal is for you to feel empowered in love, to feel empowered to really craft the romantic life that you want. And know that even if it takes time, because it might take time because you might not be ready for everything that you want right now. And also the universe's timing is actually better than ours, right? And so faith, trust, it all gets a lot easier when you can see the purpose, when you can see your role that you're playing. And it doesn't feel like it's out of your control up on a pedestal somewhere. But love is something that you can tangibly make real in your life, center in your life, and experience independent of having that partner. And even if you do have that partner, even if you are in that relationship, being able to still experience love within yourself is what you want. Okay. You never want it to be dependent on another person. When you come together with another person and you have that foundation of inner love, ooh, then it's beautiful. Then it's juicy. Then you get to have a really beautiful relationship. And that's what I want for all of you. So I thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, I do ask that you share it with someone who you think could benefit from it. And big shout out and thank you to everyone who's taken the time to rate the podcast, to review the podcast. We are 5-star reviews. I love it. I'm so grateful to you. And I'll be back next week with more. So until then, wherever you are in the world, take good care of yourself. Know that you are loved and you are loved. And I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Till next time.